So, who is a prophet? What are prophets? You know, this series we've been going through my book, Activating a Prophetic Lifestyle, and I actually started out with, there was this idea that a prophetic person was usually a male with, a nice white beard. I'm not there yet. Ragged clothes, and when he would talk, he would be like, "Thus saith the Lord," and I don't say that in a mocking way. I say that in that was a persona you kind of had. And it also came from the container of the times from which the apostolic and prophetic was being restored to the church. But this idea that someone who is a prophet kind of dialed up a certain set of mental images. And with those mental images came this way of relating to a person based on kind of who you thought they were. There's this kind of this stigmatism that they would just read your mail, or like you couldn't have sinned within a week of being around their presence and stuff like that. And so you had the prophetic movement over the last actually 30 years now. Wow. But over the time, as you've begun to see these gifts, A, restored to the church, and then B, what their true identity was all along begin to emerge, you saw some of the paradigms towards the idea of what the prophetic is and who a prophet is begin to shift. You have several movements. You have the Jesus People movement, the charismatic movement, which saw the restoration of the charismata, the ability to prophesy, what we've been talking about in the videos so far. And you have people like, your movements like Morning Star and IHOP really kind of help guide and actually rediscover and pioneer, what it was like to be a prophet. And then you have Bethel come along and kind of, where those pioneers were cutting paths in the jungle, I feel like Bethel came behind them and built like a highway. Like, here's what a prophet is in the Old Testament, here's what a prophet is in the New Testament. Now, the thing with the Old Testament is that every prophecy was according to a Messiah who was coming. And it got to the point when Jesus came, and every prophecy in the New Testament is according to the Messiah who came. So in the Old Testament, it was a ministry that would remove things from people's lives of being able to understand and perceive the coming kingdom and the Messiah. In the New Testament, it's the King is here, the kingdom's here, He's in you. So it's an encouragement that prophesies who you really are based on what He's already done in you. So if relating with people, nations, and all this kind of stuff, it's from that paradigm, from that perspective. One of the things I mentioned in the book is that pathos is there. I reserve pathos for a really seasoned father. I don't think you can have pathos without a father. And pathos kind of refers to the ability where you tap into your feeling how God is feeling towards a situation. Well, if you don't have true identity and you tap into that, then your response might be judgment towards others because God shared His heart with you. When if you do have true identity, when you feel that, then your response is mercy, because that is the judgment God gave us according to His Son. Not to get into all that. So, in my prophetic trifecta I introduced in the first video, I said I break down the prophetic into 3 areas. Number 1 is the content of the prophetic word and the delivery of the word. So that's prophecy and prophesying. What does the word say and how do you deliver that? The second area was the prophetic office or function. The third area is the prophetic life. So in the prophetic office or function, usually when people say, who's someone who sits in the prophetic office, they're referring to someone who lines up with the fivefold ministry according to Ephesians 4. So the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. And so we know that those 4 ministries are ministries that equip the church for works of service. They make the church able to be, stewards of the kingdom. They make the people in the body healthy. One of the things I like to point out is that before Jesus called the disciples apostles, they first had to have a revelation that He was a son. When they realized I'm all disheveled, man. I got stuff on my computer, my buttons coming out. But when they realized that, and that is not criteria for a prophet either, to be disheveled. You can be a disheveled prophet, or you can be a professional prophet. Look at Ezekiel and Daniel, alive at the same time. Ezekiel was ministering to refugees and having these crazy encounters, and Daniel has a much different ministry, ministering to the king himself. So there you go. There you have it. What in the world was I just talking about? Let me grab some coffee. It'll warm my soul and remind me. So yeah, I just had to go back and rewatch that. But before the disciples were recognized as apostles, or Jesus used language to call them apostles, he first called them sons. So church is a family who creates community that transforms culture. If family isn't the core, there's not going to be a family of families surrounding the family. And that family of families, if they're doing life supernaturally, the way Jesus demonstrated, then culture itself is going to feel the effects of that. When culture begins to feel the effects, that's when you have these roles, these gifts emerge: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. But you don't see that before you see a revelation of sonship. My papa, Leif Hetland, says, I had leadership, I had apostleship, but one thing I was lacking was sonship. Once I had sonship, the other ship sank, and sonship is all that was left. So, you have a lot of people kind of rush into, like, say someone gets a prophetic word that they are a prophet. There's a desire to rush into that gifting before realizing identity, becoming a son or a daughter, and then from that position learning to steward a gift in such a way to where your role may eventually become the role of a prophet. Not saying it has to happen that way every time. It's just what I've seen in my 20 years of experience. But so a prophet obviously can be a man or a woman. Men and women are created equal. We'll get into that later. It's my wife is my equal. She builds me up. I didn't marry a lesser species or a lesser being. I married someone else who was also, being female, created in the image of God. More into that later. So so you have the fivefold ministry, right? And I used to have the idea that in order for a church to be a true New Testament church, you had to have a fivefold ministry in place. I no longer agree with that. I think that would be amazing. I think it's awesome. I've seen it work once. But I think what you really need is apostolic influence. You need prophetic influence. You need evangelistic influence. You need the influences of teachers and pastors. Now, what do I mean by that? So you have a church that has, let's say, a strong apostolic figure and a strong prophetic figure, but you don't necessarily have the others. But 2 or 3 people are very prophetic, and they kind of carry the embodiment of a prophet when they get together. So therefore, you kind of do have the office of the prophet, or the prophetic function is in place in that church, even though you can't necessarily point to one individual and say they are the prophet of the house. I don't think that should be our goal. I think our goal should be sons and daughters, mothers and fathers doing life together. But when that begins to happen, you have the gifts begin to emerge, and I think it's the same way with prophets. So you might have someone who's prophetic, but it doesn't mean that they sit in the function of a prophet in the relationship that they have with different people in an influential way. Now, what I mean by that is that I have a certain measure of relationship with you right here because you're watching my video. I can't tell you what to do in your personal life. I can't tell you to do anything like that. But if you feel like some of the stuff I'm saying resonates with you, then there's a degree of a relationship there. And if you believe that I have some grid of handling some prophetic language and you choose to receive that, then there's a measure of relationship and a measure of authority because you're choosing to say, hey, I agree with this guy. I think what he's saying about the prophetic is true. Now, say my influence begins to spread and I get a lot more YouTube followers, I may have a measure of influence there. I'm still not, it's still not an intimate face-to-face relationship, but there's some measure of influence. The same thing could be said of my book. If you go buy it or get it on Amazon, and you choose to agree with the teaching or not agree, but there's still a measure of relationship and there's still a measure of me speaking into your life somewhat. And so for me, I'm somewhat of a prophetic voice in your life. Doesn't mean I sit in the office of a prophet in your life. It just means that there's some type of relationship for prophetic interaction. Well, you could say you have a young person who in a church setting somewhere. This is hypothetical, no one in mind. I use this as an example. They learn to prophesy. They kind of, the stuff we covered in the videos 1, 2, and 3. I think this is the 4th, right? They learn all about that, and they begin to practice. They practice their prophetic gifting. They learn how to, in a safe environment, to prophesy, to get some words right, some words wrong. But they're growing, they're maturing, they're learning. So after a season, say they're in young adults or something, and the young adult pastor asked them to come and deliver a prophetic message. All of a sudden, their sphere of influence went from interaction in their life to having some semblance of authority by beginning a platform to begin to speak into a broader audience. Now, the audience might not necessarily travel outside the room they're in or the young adults they're speaking to, but their measure of influence as a prophetic voice has increased. All right, let's say this goes on and on for years, and they're asked, okay, the church, the elders and different people in the family that they're a part of begin to recognize that this person does have a prophetic gifting, and they get asked to join a prophetic team. So now they're recognized as, this is a really strong brother or sister, a really strong believer who's really carrying, the prophetic. Like it's in them, it's on them, you can see it. So now their sphere of influence has gone from here to here. It's expanding, it's growing, but you can't still say, they might have, oh wow, I feel like I do carry the office of a prophet, but it's not there, it's not emerged yet. So they can carry that in their heart, and that can be, part of who they are, but it's not where they are. And a lot of times I think we get that confused. We know who we are, but it's not where we are. And how do you balance matching who you are on the inside and that equaling where you are in life? And it's so easy for young, passionate believers to jump way ahead of that. Or it's the opposite is easy, to get discouraged because the where seems so far away. That's why staying connected to Jesus every single day, that still small voice, is going to protect you in the journey of growth in life. And we'll get into more of protecting in safe environments to learn to prophesy probably in the next video or the last video. So our individual is on prophetic teams, and all of a sudden the prophetic leader steps down and he says, you know what, I'm out of here, I'm going to the beach. I may or not be alluding to something. But he's like, I'm out of here, I'm going to the beach, and I want you to be the leader of the prophetic teams in the church. All right? Now there's a big upgrade, because not only is this person now been practicing their gift for maybe 6 months, maybe 5 years on the prophetic team, but now they're in charge of their prophetic team. So with being in charge of a prophetic team comes activation and equipping. So now they've stepped out of the role of being a prophetic voice in the church to starting to equip others to prophesy within the church. And so they say it on the individual seeker they're administering a prophetic word to, there's some role of prophetic function there. To that person in that moment, their prophetic gifting was in measure operating as a prophet. Now, they have a much bigger measure now because they're actually raising up a team of other people to become prophets as well. And so you can say that, all right, this person really has a prophetic call, and now they're going to have the opportunity to steward a prophetic people within a body. Now, the relationship as prophet has now grown from a random individual and a team member to a team leader. So they're growing in that function. And so the church begins to recognize and say, they begin to, share several prophetic words in front of the church. They begin to teach in different areas and different avenues of the church. And say, this person now, within that body, within that community, they function as a prophet because they're raising up people, they're equipping people, they're doing all the stuff within their own fellowship. That's awesome. So they're in the, that might be, that's what I think that's where a lot of prophets are. We're a prophetic people. All prophetic people should inspire to be something like in the office of a prophet. You can just be prophetic. But for those individuals who are, then this is a great environment. It's a part of the family. It's a good place to be. Right, Riley's? And, wow, you guys are pulling this out of me. I didn't realize. I thought this would be like a quick 5-minute video. And I think it's needed. I think it's needed in the church. Grab some coffee and enjoy what we're talking about. So say that person, I don't know, say they write a book at that point. They've got some experience. I'll be honest, this book came out probably a year or two too early. It came out in 2013. It's 2018. I really did a refresh, I think in 2017. That's when the book felt complete. So it may have been 4 years early, but that was part of my journey and learning. But if you are a writer, go ahead and write. Just go for it. Use that gift. But don't go, bonsai solo on it. Get people around you that can speak into your life and help you with the journey. I had people speaking into my life, but I was also stubborn and with some of that advice and counsel. God's put the message in you, then He's not going to rush you to get it out. If He's put something in you, and He's put it in there to age and become the thing that He wants you to speak and share and write and reveal. So say that person has a book now. So now their influence is going outside of the church. Their influence could have, maybe hit some of the places in their city and maybe a couple random people through the grapevine, through fellowship, through people they know and integrate with. But now their influence is kind of, okay, so their book goes out and they begin to get invites to speak different places. Now I'm using the system of church that's in place. This isn't a discussion about that. So they begin to get invites and say they speak at different conferences. Now they're having prophetic influence within the body of Christ. It doesn't make them a prophet to the body, but they're having influence within the body. The same way they had influence within the church, now it's gone a whole tier up. They're having influence within the body. So now they're becoming a prophetic voice within the body, but they actually carry a prophetic office or function within their local church. But in the broader church, their influence is expanding. And now they're emerging as a prophetic voice. All right, let's just say hypothetically, now they're beginning to interact with other prophetic mothers and fathers within the church. Those prophetic mothers and fathers are pulling on this person for insight, for revelation, and stuff like that. So now you see, okay, now they're beginning to, in a sense, prophesy and find a place within the body of Christ itself, within whichever stream or movement they're in. Now they're beginning to have a prophetic voice or function there. So you see the person as they've grown and matured from learning to prophesy to individuals, to prophesying with a team, to helping to lead a team, to becoming a prophetic leader in their church, to becoming a prophetic voice in the church, to becoming a prophetic or mother and father into the church. Now you might have, say, you see stuff, you see it on Facebook. We live in a social media world where people will post national, international prophetic words about times, events, upcoming events, things like that. That's where you really need like seasoned stuff. I hear a lot of prophetic people I look up to, and it's something I kind of hold is 90% of what I get prophetically I sit on. I'll only share something right away if I feel an urgency on it, like this was a now word. Otherwise, the word's going to wait. And when Facebook first came out, I wanted to post a lot of prophetic stuff I was getting, not national stuff, but just insight from Scripture and what I felt like God was telling me. And He's like, you need to steward these more. You're getting too quick to want to post what I spoke to you this morning before you've become it. Don't repeat what I've told you before you're able to become it. But sometimes what He says is there's an instant adjustment, like the tuning on the guitar. I'm tuned to that and to where the delivery is right away. There's other times that it's kind of like in the Old Testament where like you get possessed by the spirit of prophecy and you just begin to prophesy. Okay. So however you deliver your prophetic word, it doesn't mean even if you become a prophetic father or mother to your stream or a voice in that stream that you're now inaugurated or anointed to begin to give some kind of crazy national prophecies to everyone. That may come, but remember, what you're about to say, especially with the fact that now you carry influence not only in the local church or region, but you're carrying influence in the whole body of Christ. What you're about to say has major impact, not only inside the church, but outside the church, So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying measure your words and know Jesus. Jesus, go for it, right? But be in family, don't, be connected to family. If you have something like that, that's when you go to your mothers and fathers in your life, and you go to other prophetic figures, and you can even ask your sons and daughters what they think. It's not just one way, it's interactive. A true father is willing to ask a son or a daughter a question because the son and the daughter have a perspective that the mother or father might not be able to see, and it's going to open their eyes to how that generation is thinking and feeling. Let's say and again, this isn't a hierarchical structure. I'm just kind of giving language to kind of go where I'm going in 1 second. All of a sudden, say the president or some kind of senator or something like that. It could be local, regional, or national governmental things, and they hear that this person's prophetic and they get an invite. Well, now you become a prophetic voice in a sense to the nation because you're influencing leaders. Man, that's heavy. That's a heavy thing. Like, I think if your heart is pure and you just want to share God's heart, then you're sharing it with the local person at the grocery store, with the president. That's, I think it goes in line there, but it does say several times in the Bible, when you stand before kings and queens, you're there not to make withdrawals, you're there to make deposits. So you never ever, especially if it's like governmental, you're not going to use their platform to try to expand your own, ever. And it gets hard, it gets blurry. If you notice some inconsistency, just realign yourself with Jesus and make the adjustment. But yeah, it's a heavy thing. It's a serious thing. And so when we stand before royalty or other people of influence, make deposits. Don't try to make withdrawals. Don't try to get what they have. I mean, yeah, you can receive as a mother and father, but you're not trying to take something from them to say, look what I have, when that was something that they had. So you're there to make deposits. You're there to make other people around you look great, to look awesome, to look amazing. But the whole point of this was to give you kind of a picture of how someone can grow from being prophetic voice to learning the gift, to being a prophetic voice to their friends around them, to kind of being on some type of prophetic team or something like that, to a voice in their own church and become a voice to a stream of people, to within the body, to national, international influence. So yeah, that's a picture. And, again, I say that for illustration purposes, not to encourage everyone watching to say, hey, go call the president and prophesy. From what I've heard, the people who found themselves in that situation, it was, I'm not saying it can't be a desire of your heart, but it was something that, like, God ordained and orchestrated. And again, it's not like, I'm not trying to give you guys a picture of a mountain you have to climb in the prophetic. I'm showing you how growth occurs. There's rings on a tree, and I use that illustration a lot, but the center ring expands, 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 and your influence can expand, your voice can expand as you mature and roll in the gifting. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, there's a prophetic people. I want to raise up a prophetic people. Some people, relate to me in different ways, but that's based on my relationship. I got friends who might relate to me in a prophetic sense, but in other people, I'm a prophetic voice sense. Does that make sense? If I'm talking to some of my students, there might be a role of, prophetic function or office there. If I'm relating to my spiritual Papa Leif Hetland, he might look at me from time to time for some prophetic input. And so, but I know where I am. In this area, I'm a father. In this area, I'm a son. And so, no, when you're a son, when you're a father, if you choose to always be a son, then you'll be safe in the area. But in becoming a son, you'll be able to know and recognize when it's your time to rise up as a mother and a father. And I would say that, the ones who prophesy to the nation are matriarchs and patriarchs. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Years don't matter, What matters is that the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus. And if Jesus is the testimony that surrounds your life, everything you do, everything you say, everything you speak, everything you feel, the more and more every part of your being gets stamped with Jesus in every single cell, every single thought, every single emotion, every single word that comes out of your mouth, then you're just going to all of a sudden be in amazing places, doing amazing things, testifying about Jesus.